Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the program. It is the Tuesday edition of the Big Radio Show. And, oh, baby, we got a lot to go over today. We're going to dive into it. 1 degree in Anchorage, 14 degrees in Homer, 30 below in Fairbanks. Well, up at Fox anyway. And, you know, a variety of weather around the state. And we are ready to get into it. Tuesdays means our deep dive. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is going to be joining us here in just a hot second. And we're going to get into it with him with the weekly top three. Chris Story will be joining us at the end of the show today to kind of pick us up and dust us off and bandage our wounds and do all that kind of stuff. And everything else in between will be me and you. So it's good. 41 below on off College Road this morning. Oof. And 2 below in Matsu. So I'm feeling pretty good here with my 14 degrees and a light dusting of snow. I mean, you know, it's all good. It's all good. All right. Well, I don't really have anything else this morning, so let's just jump right into it, shall we? Because we got a lot to cover with Brad Keithley, again from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who comes in every week to give us his thoughts on what's important in Alaska. And this week, it's the 5 fiscal priorities. It's the weekly top 3, but it's broken up, 3, 5, 3, and 5, and it's 15. I don't know. Multiply it. Divide it by 0, and the next thing you know, you've got a lot of good stuff. Brad Keithley joins us this morning. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. Obviously, I didn't get the memo today. I don't have red on to match your brilliant showing here.
Come on, man. You got to read my mind and know exactly what I'm going to wear today. Brad, you and I were talking about this here over the week, and of course, there's a lot of stuff going on. But I have been telling everybody that I can talk to that they should be, listening to the Tuesday shows, talking to you, asking you, for advice, everybody from gubernatorial candidates down to legislators. And this is a show that they're going to want to watch because this is going to be a sneak peek of what you think are the important things. And I think you and I are in agreement on most things. So let's dive into this today and talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, so what I've done is I've prepared a list of the top 5 fiscal priorities for this coming session. And I've tried to capture stuff we've talked about on the show before, stuff that I've written about in the landmine, but sort of synthesize it down to 5 key points that I think legislators and others need to be focusing on as we go into this session from a fiscal standpoint. Obviously, there are other issues out there, but from a fiscal standpoint. The first one is what we talked about last week, the most important issue, fiscal issue, I think this coming session is to reject the proposed constitutional amendment that's in both the Senate and the House to change the permanent fund structure from the current 2-account system to a single account approach. As we've talked about repeatedly on the show before, as we talked about last week, the concern I and others have is what that would do is open a back door into the permanent fund corpus and start allowing the legislature, if earnings aren't sufficient to fund the POMV draw, allow the legislature to start drawing down the corpus in order to continue to fund spending. It is, I think Rob Myers puts it best, it's to protect the spend as opposed to protect. The proposal is to protect the spend as opposed to protect the fund. And it's not just me. I mean, Joe Pascavan, former Senator Joe Pascavan from Fairbanks, probably a person as far away from me as you possibly can get politically, wrote an op-ed in the ADN this week that raises the same issues. I will say there's been one development on this that's worth noting and worth watching. Bruce Tangeman, who's been one of the biggest critics of the issue that we've raised, Tangeman wrote a op-ed in the Alaska Landmine that was published last Friday, and it proposed a change to what he suggests is a compromise to the legislation that's currently before the legislature, and the compromise would be to set the draw at the lower of 5%, which is what the proposed constitutional amendment says now, at the lower of 5% or actual earnings averaged over some period of time. And the proposal is to meet the objection that I and others have raised about the fact that this would start draining additional amounts from the permanent fund corpus over and above earnings. You got to keep in mind that the permanent fund corporation's objective is to hit 5% on an annual basis, but they only hit that about 50% of the time. The actual earnings are lower than 5% about 50% of the time. So what the proposal that Tangeman put in the landmine would be is if the actual earnings averaged over a period of time is 4%, then the draw would be 4%. If it's 3%, the draw would be 3% averaged over time. If they hit 6%, the draw would still be limited at 5%. It'd be 5%, the lower of 5% or actual earnings. I've been running a bunch of numbers to try to evaluate what that would do, and it would create some variability in the draw. I mean, sometimes it would be as low as 3 point something, and sometimes it would be over the last 25 years. Sometimes it would be at 4 point something. It would very rarely be at 5, but it would create some variability in the draw, but not a huge amount of variability. So there's some something to be said for that. Now, that's not the proposal that's on the table. That's not what the legislation is. It reads currently before the Senate and the House, and as those read right now, defeating that proposal, I think, is the most important thing out there. But people are beginning, as I say, Tangeman's been one of the sharpest critics about the issues that we've raised. There are people out there that are beginning to take them seriously, and I think we may potentially see some progress on this as the session goes on. But we have to keep our eye focused on it.
We had Jeremy Bynum on the program last week, and he had some of the same resistance that you're talking about in Tangeman when I was talking about this. And he goes, I don't think they would do that, but he goes, I wouldn't support it unless there was a mechanism to protect the corpus baked into the constitutional amendment. So at least there's that, because we brought up the corpus argument, and he said, well, I don't think they'd do that. And I'm just
of course.
Yeah, have you seen, past performance is indicative of future results. Have you not seen what they've done in the past? But he at least said that he would not be in favor of it unless there was some kind of mechanism. And this sounds like that mechanism. What's your thoughts on creating a one account system if there is a mechanism? Is there a benefit? Is there another danger outside of that? What are your thoughts?
Well, some say that it makes investing easier for the permanent fund. The permanent fund corporation itself doesn't say that, but some claims it makes investing easier. If there's a mechanism to protect the draw at no more than the actual earnings, if there's a mechanism to protect that, then I don't see as much of a downside of combining the two. But there's got to be that mechanism in there, or else combining the two opens the back door. Okay.
Well, at least somebody's talking about it. And like I said, between Bynum and Tangeman, maybe we're starting to get some traction on this.
Yep. Let's go on to number 2. Number 2 is to restore balance to the state's oil production tax code. The landmine article I wrote last week that's in Friday's column, the one that's current for for this week, focused on the history of the oil tax code and the percent. The way to determine what the oil tax code's doing is to look at the percent of gross revenues, gross wellhead revenues that the oil tax code is taking. Some states just cut to the chase and say, look, the oil tax code, the production tax is 7% or 6% or 5% or 8% or some percent of gross production tax because of gross production revenues. Because we want to incentivize certain things. Back in 2013, we want to incentivize investment in certain areas. Back in 2013, we went away from that. Alaska went away from that and built in all of these bells and whistles designed to incentivize certain behaviors by the producers, financially incentivize certain behaviors by the producers. But the goal of any oil production tax code at the end of the day should be to take a relatively steady stream of revenues for the state from the gross wellhead revenues being realized by the producer. And I went in the Friday's column, I went in and tried to calculate or did calculate what the level of gross wellhead revenues is that's being taken. And it shows a very, very, very sharp difference between what's happened during the first decade of SB 21 and what's projected now to happen in the second decade of SB 21. In the first decade of SB 21, the oil tax code, the production tax code, took about 6.75% of gross wellhead revenues, and that's comparable to the typical 7% or so that you find, just straight up 7% of gross wellhead revenues that you find in the lower 48 production tax codes in the lower 48. So even though we had a bunch of bells and whistles and a bunch of different things going on with SB 21, at the end of the day, over the span of the decade, we still averaged out at about what you would find in another state that was using a percent of gross revenues as a basis for its code. What happens in the second decade of SB 21, the decade we're about to enter, is hugely different. Rather than the 6.75% average over the previous decade, we're about to enter a decade where the average is going to be 2%. Averaged over the decade, and less than 2% averaged over the last 5 years of the decade. And what's happening is all the bells and whistles that got put in SB 21 are sort of piling on top of each other, layering on top of each other in a way that's continuing to drive that revenue to the state from the production tax down and down and down and down and down. And the cumulative impact is to drive those production tax revenues way down. We can't, obviously that's creating a huge deficit, contributing to a huge deficit in the state's funding. It's about $500 million, $400 and $500 million. The difference between the 2% and the 6.75% is about $500 million. The amount that we've talked about all along as being how far below the constitutional mandate of maximum benefit the oil tax code is producing. And so I think, we're staring at huge deficits out into the future. And one of the key ways of restoring balance, of restoring that budget, of overcoming those deficits is to get the share of gross wellhead revenues that the state's deriving through the production tax code back up. So I think that demonstrates, I hope that article demonstrates the need to go in and repair the state's oil production tax code to restore balance between the benefits to the producer and what's being taken by the state.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. This is the Legislative Priorities edition. We've gone through the first 2 of the 5 priorities, and we're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio will return with number 2 of the weekly top 3, which means points 3 and 4 on Brad's 5-point plan. There's a lot of math involved here. It's a weekly top 3 with 5 points plus we carried the one, and then the next thing you know, we're at the end. All right, we're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest, and we're continuing on here. I mean, this whole thing with the oil production and the oil tax, this plays back into a lot, and it goes back to what we were talking about with some of these new fields, right, Brad? Where, I mean, we're going to be taking a lower return, higher production, lower returns, and I mean, if we get 20% of state revenues from oil in the future, this is going to be, I mean, we're going to be lucky, right? If we get 20% of royal revenues in the future because of this increase in production and drop in actual revenue.
Yeah, we got situations like at Pica where the state gets zero production tax for the first 7 years from the new Pica field. I mean, everybody's, oh, it's the savior. Pica's the savior. We get zero production tax for the first 7 years, and that's the effect of layering all of these various provisions. At some point, and I think I've heard Will Stapp say this. Well, we've got a fail safe. There's a 4% minimum tax, minimum gross receipts tax or gross revenues tax built into SB 21, and that's sort of the floor. And what we're really talking about is stuff that goes on above is stuff that's driving it down to the floor. No, we don't have a 4%. I mean, that was one of the headlines that was in SB 21 at the time it was adopted. Oh, we've got this fail safe of 4%. But there are provisions in SB 21 that allow they relate to the gross value reduction provision, the GVR provision, that allow certain credits and certain expenditures or certain gross reductions in gross revenue to go below the cap. And so it's driving, for example, the Pica field, it's driving that to zero for the first 7 years. When people say, "Oh, new production, new development is going to save us," all we need to do is to have that new production come online, and we'll be back up and running. Not true, because of the provisions of SB 21, the way they're layering on top of each other in the second decade, the way they've sort of folded in on each other in the second decade, it's driving production taxes way down to the point where in some fields, some of these new fields, it's zero. So yeah, it's got to be fixed, and it's got to be fixed soon, because we're never going to get it. Every year that we allow Pica to go without paying taxes, we're not going to get it back. It's not like we're deferring it to the future. These are absolute credits that wipe out tax liability year by year by year. So the longer you let those provisions run, the more years of production you have that you're never going to tax, and you're never going to receive tax from. So it's something that this legislature, I'm sure nobody wants to hear this at the legislature, but this legislature needs to address, or else we're going to have a year of production from Pica and a year of production from setting up a year of production from Willow, where we're not going to receive any revenues from it.
Charlie asked, why can't we get a basic extraction tax on each barrel instead of this complex, it's like a abacus thing. I mean, you got to figure out 63 different provisions to figure out what the formula is.
That's what some people said they put into SB 21 at the time it was adopted, the 4% minimum tax. But the problem is there are exceptions. We also build in exceptions to that minimum tax that drives the tax down. So yeah, we could go back and, as part of the fix, reset that 4% and make sure that nothing penetrates the 4%, So you have 4% as a basic minimum. It lives up to the billing it had at the time SB 21 was passed. But that's not what we've got right now. We've got a system where you can penetrate that minimum with certain provisions of SB 21. And as I say, that's what's happening at PICA for the first 7 years of production.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. And we're going to get into the next couple priorities for Brad. Please be sure to like and share, follow, ring the bell, tell all your friends, YouTube, put a sign out front. Write dirty words on your car in the back and say, Michael Duke said it. Whatever it is, let's get more people involved in this. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, Brad Keithley is with us for the weekly top 3. This week, the 3 is made up of 5 points that Brad is going to be focusing on during the legislative session. If any legislators or candidates want some talking points, here's a great opportunity. We just got through the first 2, which was reject the proposed constitutional amendment to combine the permanent fund. The second one is to restore the balance with the state's oil production tax, because we're behind the power curve on that for sure. Let's move on to number 3, which is a restructuring and constitutionalizing the PFD with a POMV draw. Brad?
So, I mean, we've got to get the PFD resolved. And the best way to resolve the PFD is with POMV 50% sharing of the POMV draw, percent of market value draw that the legislature makes each year from the permanent fund, sharing that 50% each to the PFD and to government. You know what? We get into all these debates about, it's free money. It's free money that's going to the PFD, and there's no reason not to cut there's no reason to have that free money, and we ought to cut the free money and use it for other things. All of the permanent fund, all of the POMV draw is free money. It goes 2 directions. Part of it goes to the PFD, which mostly benefits middle and lower income Alaska families. And the other 50% of the free money goes to covering a share of government spending in lieu of taxes, which mostly benefits upper income families, non-residents, and oil companies. By protecting against, shielding against taxes that they would otherwise have to pay for government spending. They're beneficiaries of the free money. The upper income families, non-residents, and the oil companies are as much beneficiaries of free money as the PFD recipients. What Hammond did, and what the founders of the PFD did when they looked at the stream of earnings, is they said we ought to share that 50% to what mostly benefits middle and lower income Alaska families, and we ought to share that 50% when the time comes to what mostly benefits upper income families and non-residents and the oil companies. What we've done by using PFD cuts is we've tilted that balance. We've tilted that balance by taking the free money, it's all free money, by taking the free money and putting more and more and more of it over on the second side of covering a share of government spending in lieu of taxes to the benefit of upper income families, non-residents, and the oil companies. And so we've gotten into this imbalance where more than 80% of it in most years now, 80% of it is going to the benefit of upper income families, going to the benefit of those who benefit from shielding from taxes, and only 20% going to middle and lower income Alaska families. We need to take that pot of free money and go back to where we were, share it 50-50 between the portion that's going to middle and lower income Alaska families, mostly to benefit middle and lower income Alaska families that we call the PFD, and 50% of it going to the other side. We need to restore that balance that Hammond originally established. And now that we know that the legislature won't follow the law because that's what the law currently provides. The 50-50 split is what the law currently provides. Now that we know the legislature won't follow the law, we need to constitutionalize the provision to make sure that we don't slip back into this situation where the free money is being given mostly to the upper income families and non-residents. So the restructuring the PFD to POMV 50-50, I think is an important step to get the balance that was originally set into the PFD statute restored, to get the sharing between middle and lower income Alaska families of the free money, all free money, to get the sharing between middle and lower income Alaska families and upper income families and non-residents and the oil companies, to get that sharing restored.
Well, it would also have a knock-on effect, right, as far as the impact on the economy and everything else. I mean, it's a rising tide floats all boats. And when we say free money, I mean, obviously Brad is he's got quotes on this. There's air quotes on it. I mean, this is money that's been earned. We are owners of the resource. This is earnings money. We are, if this is our corporate dividend, essentially, because it's all owned corporately. But the government has been taking an unfair share of that for the last 6-7 years. And go ahead.
Well, the reason I use free money is because that's what people who try to attack the PFD call it. But you have to understand it's all free money, and the portion that's going to cover government spending, which is in lieu of taxes, that otherwise would hit upper income families and non-residents and the oil companies. That's free money as well. They're benefiting from this, quote, free money as well. So it's not, I mean, yes, it is earnings that we're entitled to, but those who try to categorize it as free money they try to say, oh, it's just the only free money is going out the PFD. No, it's going out both ways. It's going out both in terms of being in lieu of taxes as well as through the PFD.
And of course, this means that this is, again, goes back to our position before that it's all a tax at this point, right? It's just a stealth tax that we're never seeing hit our bank account before they draw it back out. And so therefore, Alaskans remain subservient and quiet instead of getting all the money and then having a tax bill laid on their doorstep where they may react to that at that point.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah. So restructuring the POMV, I know we've talked about this. There's been a couple proposals on this, Brad, and it really hasn't. It really, and I don't think Brad is trying to normalize the term free money, folks. I think he's using it with the quotes as far as pointing out how duplicitous that phrase is. But I mean, we've tried to do this a couple times, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for it. What do you think?
Well, it is what we're allowing to happen is to take the money, whether you want to call it free or not, but to take the earnings from the permanent fund and increasingly go to the benefit of upper income families, non-residents, and the oil companies. We're allowing that division increasingly to flow in one direction, and that has bad economic effects. I mean, it is this approach to revenues. ICER told us in 2016, as far back as 2016, has the largest adverse impact on the overall economy because you're taking the money out of the hands of families who would otherwise spend it. So it's in the local economy. So it's something from both an economic standpoint, from both a fairness standpoint, in terms of making sure that the benefit of that commonly owned wealth is split evenly between the two classes. It's a fairness point. It's also an economic point that we need to adopt. People say, oh, we've got all this out-migration problem. Well, the out-migration is in the middle income families. We actually have in-migration among the upper income families. Out-migration is among the middle income families. We are taking money out of the pockets of middle income families. The very people who are out migrating, we're taking money out of their pockets in order to supplement the income, basically supplement the income of upper income families. And that's working against us in terms of the out migration issue. We're supplementing the income of people who are already coming here,
Right.
And we're taking money out of the pockets of people who are leaving.
All right, that's number 3 of Brad's 5 big points. We're going to continue on, Brad. Number 4 of your 5 big points for the legislature to look at under fiscal issues.
Well, Michael, we've got a huge deficit in the state, and the question is, how are we going to close the deficit? We've been closing the deficits through PFD cuts, which are the most regressive tax ever proposed, hit middle and lower income Alaska families hardest of all of the alternatives, have the largest adverse impact on the economy of all of the proposals. We've got to close the deficit in some way. Some people say, oh, do it all through spending cuts. Dunleavy tried that in 2019, didn't work. He's not tried it. No one's tried it again since. And all that argument is about, oh, we got to close it through spending cuts. It's just ignored by the legislature year after year after year. And all it's doing is extending PFD cuts, because if we don't have substitutes to close the fiscal gap, the legislature is just using PFD cuts. So we've got to find some way, some economically efficient way to close the gap. And a broad-based tax is the best way to do it. It has the lowest adverse impact. An ultra broad-based tax, like some have proposed, would have the lowest adverse impact on the overall economy. It'd be the most economically efficient way of raising revenues in terms of the economic impact. It would be the fairest way, because it would have all Alaskans and non-residents contributing to closing the fiscal gap, instead of by using PFD cuts. We're just mostly limiting it to middle and lower income Alaska families. It's the fairest way to do it. It's the most economically efficient way to do it, and it's the way that would drive, I think, incentives to push back on spending. Right now, the top 20%, the oil companies, and certainly the non-resident industries, don't care about spending because they don't have to pay for it. It's all being pushed downhill to middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. Having a broad-based tax that they would have to contribute to as well would create an economic incentive for them to push back on spending also. But we can't just do a broad-based tax alone. I mean, we've seen that with the tool of a broad-based tax, legislatures will continue to increase those. So it needs to be coupled with an effective spending cap. We have a spending cap in the state right now. We have a constitutional spending cap in the state right now, but it doesn't work because it's just sort of,
right.
It was set on premises, sort of like oil taxes, right? It was set on premises that are no longer valid. So we need to go in and we need to adopt an effective spending cap as part of adopting a broad-based tax as a way of dealing with the fiscal gaps that we've got.
This is where you and I have always diverged, because of the factor of the broad-based tax or any kind of new taxation. My stance has always been, of course, Parkinson's principles rule, which is government spending expands to consume all the available money. So if we put new broad-based tax in, they would just spend that as well. But if there is some kind of constitutional or effective enforceable spending cap, that would in fact force them then to move those monies to somewhere else. If they got the money from a tax, then they couldn't take it from the PFD because they would basically be bumping up against the spending cap, right?
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. And if you constitutionalize, I mean, all of these sort of go together. If you constitutionalize the PFD, you take PFD cuts off the table in terms of being a revenue source. So once you do that, once you take PFD cuts off the table as a revenue source, you've got to find another way, a more efficient way, economically efficient way, a more fair way to raise the revenue. And that's what a broad-based tax would be. And I'm not talking about an income tax. I mean, some people say, oh my gosh, he's talking about income tax. I'm not. I mean, what analyses have proven is that ultra broad-based sales tax would be almost as fair to middle and lower income Alaska families as any other approach, an ultra broad-based sales tax, because you would have everybody contributing to it, as opposed to just focusing it on one narrow slice of the populace. So it is an economically efficient way, reduces the adverse impact on the overall economy, spreads the burden broadly, brings everybody into the game, creates an incentive for everybody to push back on spending. And then with the being combined with an effective spending cap, it limits the ability of government to use that to raise excess revenues.
One of the interesting things that I've seen so far about the 4 points that you've made so far is that they hit on both sides of the political aisle, to where it's kind of a mixed bag. This is targeted at both, conservatives and business as usual Republicans and the Democratic minority, where number one, with the constitutional amendment to change a permanent fund, that's a mixed bag of both Democrats and Republicans who are in favor and opposed to it. Restoring the balance of the tax code, Republicans are going to be fully, probably fully entrenched against that. The restructuring and constitutionalizing the PFD, the left doesn't necessarily want that as well as the, business as usual Republicans. And now you've got this spending cap and a broad-based tax, which of course Republicans are going to be vehemently opposed to, and especially when we're talking about having some kind of spending limit on top of it. There's something for everybody to hate here, but these are all the points you're making.
Well, and Michael, what's driving this is economics. I'm not trying to achieve political objectives here. I'm trying to achieve economics. PFD cuts have the largest adverse impact on the overall economy. They target the middle income and lower income Alaska families. They target the very Alaskans that are leaving the state. They're taking money out of the hands of the very people, the working Alaska families, the very people we're trying to keep in the state. And so it's economically driven. All of this is economically driven to try to maximize the Alaska economy, as opposed to having these revenue approaches and these various tax approaches that drive the economy down. Broad basing a tax levelizes the tax across a broad base. Everybody pays a little bit. Everybody has an incentive to push back on excess spending. It levelizes it across the economy. No one segment, to use Governor Dunleavy's words at one point, no one segment pays more than it should. So it's the most economically efficient way to solve the problems that we've gotten ourselves into.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three continues. We've got our fifth fiscal priority plus anything extra that Brad wants to talk about. That's up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will continue in just a moment.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and the weekly top three. And Brick makes a valid point. He says, doesn't work because legislators don't follow the law. Also, they have a difficult time keeping the people's best interest at the top of their plan. They just have to spend. And that's the thing. That's the impetus for these folks, is just, it seems, to continually spend. You can give us your thoughts on this, Brad. I have to go run and get my sweater real quick while you talk about this.
That's a little chillier than you thought, huh?
Well, I just, I thought you know how it is. Sometimes I was very optimistic about how warm I would be. All right. So anyway, you can answer Rick's question here while I go grab that real quick.
Well, legislators do have an impetus to spend, because that's what gets them reelected. People go down to Juneau and they lobby for spending, and legislators want to be responsive to their constituents who are lobbying for that additional spending. And so, yeah, that's something they do. And so that's why we need to do two things. One is to create an incentive on people to push back on legislators themselves and on their donors in the upper income brackets and the oil companies and the non-resident industries, to push back on spending by taxing them also, by including them in the revenue base. We need to create economic incentives for that pushback, and then we also need to put in an effective spending cap, because that ultimately limits the degree to which they can be responsive to those special interests that come down and lobby for more money. It's both an economic incentive approach of limiting of creating pushback on additional spending, as well as a structural approach of creating a cap on that additional spending.
Corey asked the question that I think a lot of people are asking as they hear more and more about sales taxes and various forms of taxes, et cetera. She says, if a sales tax is incorporated, would applying it to non-essential items only be enough, or would this impact us? What would the exemptions be in your book as you look at this?
The problem with exemptions is that they take away revenue, right? So if you're trying to raise $100 million and you have a sales tax of a broad sales tax, and everybody may need to pay 1% or a fraction of 1%, I'm sure, whatever the math is. But if you limit it and you say, 20% of that tax base is exempt in some fashion or excluded in some fashion, then you need to raise the tax on the remaining 80% to get the same amount of revenue. So the broader the tax, the broader the applicability of the tax, the lower the rates for everyone. And those who otherwise argue that they need exemptions get lower rates because the tax is broader. Once you start bringing in exemptions, it's like an income tax. Once you start bringing in exemptions, once you start trying to build tax structures that incentivize certain things, or like the production tax, once you start trying to incentivize and favoring certain groups, you start screwing up the tax in a way that ultimately, in the case of the production tax, we don't get the revenue that we thought we were going to get, because we've created all these exemptions and exclusions that sort of pile on top of one another. Same thing with the sales tax. The more exemptions and exclusions you put in there, the lower the revenue you get, and the more screwed up the tax gets.
Rick says, do you think that the day will come where they campaign on "we have to cut spending"? I don't think I'd hold my breath on that, but
yes, because if the top 20% non-residents and the oil companies have to pay for a portion of that additional spending, I mean, keep in mind they haven't done that. So if they have to do that, then yes, I think there will be pushback by those, and that's the donor class. There will be pushback by those people on increased spending, and they will say, yes, we need to cut spending because you need to cut our taxes. Unlike the federal government, we have to have a balanced budget. So we can't, shove all this out to future generations through bonds by running huge deficits and selling bonds. We have to pay for it. So if you make everybody, all Alaskans, have a broad base and make all Alaskans pay for it, yes, I think there is a situation in which you start having pushback about pushing back on spending.
Randy says, please don't slap a sales tax or income tax on hardworking Alaskans just so you can hand out their money to new arrivals and non-working people. Yeah, but what about the out-of-state working people? I mean, there's a lot of money that is left on the table on that. You got about 30 seconds here, Brad.
Randy will never accept that the biggest burden of PFD cuts is falling on middle-income Alaska families. 60% of Alaska families, they are working. We're taking money out of the pockets of working Alaska families. And through PFD cuts, we're taking more out of their pockets than we would through a broad-based tax. So Randy's trying to protect a class, is trying to punish a class, middle-income families who are working, trying to punish them just because there's a fringe out there that may not be working. It is over.
All right. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, our guest. We're on the weekly top 3, which is made up of 5 fiscal priorities. We've gone through the first 4. Now we're on to the final one and any other extra issues. Number 5 of your big fiscal issues, Brad, has to do with the Permanent Fund Corporation Board.
We've talked a lot on the show, Michael, about the permanent fund not keeping up with the S&P 500 and other passive measures, not earning what it could, that we're not using the earnings base, the earnings potential of the permanent fund to its maximum. And that's having a boomerang effect in terms of creating additional fiscal gap. It is part of the way to close the fiscal gap is by increasing oil taxes, reforming oil taxes to make sure we're getting the maximum benefit, the required maximum benefit for the people out of the development of the state's resource. That's part of closing the fiscal gap. Reforming the Permanent Fund Corporation Board, getting the maximum out of the permanent fund, getting the maximum return out of the permanent fund, which is then drawn through the POMV, then comes into state income through the POMV, 50% to go to state government. That is part of closing the fiscal gap as well. The problem with the permanent fund, the problem with the deficient returns of the permanent fund, I think, is that we have a Permanent Fund Corporation Board who's non-experienced, has no experience, no substantial experience or background or understanding of the investment world, don't know the questions to ask, don't know the points to make in terms of directing the Permanent Fund Corporation staff on how to invest the dollars. And so we've sort of fallen into this safety first approach of the Permanent Fund Corporation of, we'll get earnings, but we're not going to expose ourselves to any risk. I mean, we just sort of want a risk-free return along the way. And those are deficient returns. We could be doing well if we had a more aggressive investment strategy. And I think the beginning and end of that is with the Permanent Fund Corporation Board. If you have people who are experienced in the investment world, if you have people who understand the investment world, understand the questions to ask, and the Permanent Fund Board is who makes the allocations between various investment categories. If we have people knowledgeable making those decisions about the allocations between various investment categories, they would also be the ones to decide whether or not we go to a more passive investment, reduce the $1 billion in expenses we're currently running on an annual basis in the Permanent Fund Corporation to pay for all these advisors that are necessary to the management approach, to the active management approach that the Permanent Fund Corporation is currently taking. If we had a board that was more experienced, more understanding, more knowledgeable about the investment world, I think a lot of those issues would be resolved. I don't want to see the legislature, some people have said, well, we're just going to mandate that the permanent fund invest in the S&P 500. We're going to mandate that the permanent fund invest in this or invest in that. I think that's the wrong approach, because the investment world changes, and you don't want to have some sort of static mandate that the Permanent Fund Corporation needs to be doing this or that, depending upon as the investment world changes. So I think that the solution to getting better permanent fund returns, is to have a permanent fund board that, like in other states, and we've talked about this on previous programs, like in other states, is required to have Permanent Fund Corporation board members that are required to have a substantial experience, investment experience and understanding before being appointed to the Permanent Fund Corporation. What we've fallen into with the Permanent Fund Corporation board is sort of friends and neighbors. I mean, we've got a Permanent Fund Corporation board that are friendly to the administration, have served in prior roles in the administration, non-investment roles, but have served in prior roles in the administration, are favorable to the administration, and are sort of sold as they understand Alaska. That's not what we need on the Permanent Fund Corporation board. Maybe on the AIDC board or the ADA board or the AGDC board, maybe that's, we need people who understand Alaska on those boards. But on the Permanent Fund Corporation board, you want people with green eye shades who understand investments and who understand how to maximize investments. They may not understand much about Alaska, but if they understand investments and understand how to maximize investment returns, they're going to produce the type of returns that then allow us to have a better balanced budget. So going forward, I think reform of the Permanent Fund Corporation Board is the key to beginning to get the returns from the permanent fund more in line with what's available out there in the market.
All right, just under 3 minutes here, Brad. So you've laid out your five big ideas here, your fiscal points. Give me a scorecard here. The top 5 fiscal priorities. What do you think the chances are that people are actually going to listen? Are legislators going to look at this list and buy into it? Gubernatorial candidates? What do you think?
I think legislators and gubernatorial candidates are truly concerned about the Alaska economy and are truly concerned about achieving a balance in the Alaska economy and achieving a balance between what government takes and what the private sector takes. I think in doing that on a fair basis, a balanced basis across all. I think legislators who are concerned about that will see these and start to focus on them and start to work on them. Legislators who are more concerned about, I've got to deal with this special interest or that special interest, and I don't really care where the revenues come from. I just need to get money so I can, increase K through 12 spending, or I can increase construction spending, or I can increase spending over here. I really don't care about the revenue side, and I really don't care about the economic effect that the revenue side is having. I think legislators who take that attitude won't spend much time worrying about these. But those who understand the overall economic situation of Alaska, those who understand that the revenue side, how you draw revenues and the level at which you draw revenues, has as much impact on the overall Alaska economy as the spending side. Those who understand that the revenue side plays a co-equal role in the impact on the Alaska economy will pay attention to these and start to think about incorporating them in their campaigns or in their legislation. I think we're going to see a big part of that around the first issue, the proposed constitutional amendment to change the permanent fund. Are we going to see people who understand the permanent fund structure? Are people going to understand that they're robbing Peter to pay Paul? They're robbing Peter out of robbing the future generations by combining the two accounts without regard to earnings levels. I think we're going to see whether people understand that in that issue, and then that will play into additional issues as well.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Hour 2 is dead ahead, my friends. Back with more in a minute. I think Frank makes a good point here. He says it's odd how many other boards have member qualification language in the statute, but the Permanent Fund Board does not.
It has some qualifying language. They have to be, experienced in business or something like that. But that's not enough. I mean, Ralph Samuels is experienced in business. He's experienced in government. He understands Alaska probably better than 90% of the people out there. But Ralph Samuels has never been in the investment world. And Ralph Samuels doesn't understand, and Jason Bruni don't understand the investment community, the investment alternatives, dealing with a passive investment fund as opposed to an active investment fund. So the type of language that we currently have in the Permanent Fund Corporation Board statute doesn't match up to what you see in other states about focusing on the investment world.
So with these five points, these 5 fiscal points that you have here, again, what are the possibilities that are gubernatorial candidates going to be talking about these top 5 things? Do you think? Or I know some legislators have expressed an interest in kind of understanding some of this stuff, but I mean, what do you think? Are we going to get down into the weeds like this, or are we going to be stuck in the press op? It's for the children. I mean, all the other things. I mean, what do you think is going to happen here? Give me some predictions.
It depends on, as I said, it depends on whether the gubernatorial candidates or the legislative candidates really are concerned about the overall Alaska economy, or whether they see their opportunity to be elected in focusing on a narrow group like the K through 12 industry, and just promising, whatever it takes, we'll get revenues for wherever we need to spend in this category. And it's going to be telling. I mean, do we have candidates that have a broad view, understand the economics of Alaska, or do we have candidates who are just going to appeal to narrow segments? I'm concerned that one of the fallouts of ranked choice voting is that we've got candidates focused on narrow categories. Shelley Hughes should be a candidate who talks about all five of these things. All five of these were touched on to one extent or another in the Legislative Fiscal Policy Working Groups, the 2021 the Legislative Fiscal Policy Working Groups proposal for a comprehensive fiscal plan. Shelley was a key member of that working group, and I would think would be good to run on that as a platform. She's not. She's focusing instead on a fairly narrow segment. If you listen to Shelley's discussion of economic issues, if you listen to Shelley's discussion of revenue issues, spending issues, she's focusing on a fairly narrow segment. And I think that's the result of ranked choice voting. I think people say, oh, I need 15%. I need 15% to get to the final four, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do from that. But I need to get there first, and I need that 15% to vote for me to get me into the final four. And I think what that's doing, what ranked choice voting is doing, is focusing people on these narrow segments. So I'm not sure in the initial run that we get a candidate who focuses on the big picture, who focuses on the Alaska economy as a whole and what it takes to rebalance the Alaska economy and get Alaska's fair share out of the oil industry. I'm not sure of that, because I think ranked choice voting has created this situation where people are just sort of the opposite of what the defenders of it or the proponents of it said at the beginning. It is narrowing the focus of candidates as they try to get that 15%, as opposed to broadening their perspective as they try to build a coalition to ultimately win the election.
I think Frank said, "You don't think that non-residents are paying enough to our state?" What are they paying? They're paying almost nothing. I mean, a bed tax for non-residents, for visitors, and of course, non-resident workers are not paying anything.
That's not a state tax. Bed tax is a local tax. I mean, they're paying local sales taxes, but to the state, you're exactly right, Michael. They're not paying anything to the state. Jeff Hildebrand, by incorporating as an S corp as opposed to a C corp, isn't even paying the petroleum corporate income tax that others are. He lives down in Texas, and he's not paying the petroleum corporate income tax for the Hillcorp production. So yeah, no, I don't think non-residents are paying enough at all, paying their contribution to the state. Alaska, unlike any other state, doesn't have a sales tax, doesn't have a statewide income tax to reach non-residents. I mean, that's what those two types of taxes do. That's what a broad-based tax does. It reaches non-residents. In Alaska, we could reduce the burden on Alaska families by 15% if we had a broad-based tax, because 15% of that revenue would come from non-residents. Right now, we're making Alaskans pay 100% of that through PFD cuts. If you had a broad-based tax that picked up non-residents, you'd reduce that burden on Alaska families by 15%. That's a big part of why PFD cuts are the worst economically for Alaska, because you're making only Alaskans bear the cost. You're not bringing in anything from non-residents to help bear the cost.
Speaking of Hildebrandt, I saw he made a bunch of comments about Venezuela. You got less than 60 seconds. Any snapshot thought on that on the way out the door?
I think Venezuela, I think the deal with Venezuela is it's going to be an attractive opportunity for people who otherwise might invest in Alaska. So yeah, I think that we're seeing the first crack in the door with the statements he made.
Yeah, and I'm a little concerned about it because he was just one of many that started talking about what they could do here in the future as well. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. You can find him at ak4sp.com. Go argue with him on Facebook and Twitter. If you want to talk about your PFD, Randy, there's a place to go. All right, Brad, thanks so much for coming on board. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for being on the program today. All right, folks, that does it for us. Hour one is in the can. We're on the way out the door. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to hour two of the big radio show. We're ready to go here, continuing on with our discussion. And we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who gave us the top 5 fiscal priorities that he thinks legislators should be paying attention to. And let me just be real clear here on this. I guess first and foremost, I should, I've been giving the weather forecast around the state here every morning as we go through. 1 degree in Anchorage, 14 degrees in Homer, 2 below in the Mat-Su at the last report, and between 30 and 40 below in Fairbanks, depending on where you're at. So, but that's where it's at right now. But let's get back to what Brad was just talking about. Again, these fiscal priorities. Now, here's the thing that kills me on this. Terry just posted in the chat room. She said that she was at a governor's roundtable last night. 6 candidates there out of what? 13, 14 candidates, 6 candidates there, all were spouting the same message. She said, I was not impressed. The budget was not a big topic, which for me is mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling that the budget was not a big topic, because the budget is going to be the number one thing this next governor is faced with. I mean, that is going to be the crushing inevitability that the next governor is faced with, because we've already seen, I mean, we've been talking about the governor's 10-year forecast on this program for the last 2 years, 3 years, maybe. We've been talking about it. And every time the new 10-year forecast comes out, it just gets worse. And again, the governor's 10-year forecasts are all based on pie-in-the-sky budgets that are, you know, and what I mean by pie-in-the-sky is that they're using very rosy assumptions that, it'll just be a flat budget, no real increases, nothing, no extra spending, no extra BSA, no defined benefits, no tax breaks for anybody. Just kind of, we're assuming it's just going to all go along to get along. And we're still billions of dollars in the hole. And ideally, the one thing that the state has to deal with behind everything else is a budget, because what the state is required to provide by the Constitution, of course, public safety, education, infrastructure, all of those things touch back on the budget. The budget is everything. And yet what we have this 20 years of just basically pretending like the budget doesn't matter. It's like whose line is it anyway, where the rules don't matter, the points don't matter and the rules are made up. Right? we're going to keep spending no matter what. It's just, we've got to do it because people are counting on us and we've got to spend it. And it doesn't matter how we do it. There's no, this should be on the top of everybody's mind. And this, when I say this, I'm talking about these top 5 fiscal priorities that Brad laid out. The constitutional amendment to change the permanent fund. And again, that's not an amendment. That's not a proposal to protect the permanent fund. I mean, that's what they say, right? Well, we're protecting the permanent fund from utter destruction. No, this is a proposal to protect the spend. Because they understand that if they don't combine the permanent fund, if they don't give themselves access to the corpus of the fund, and they're at the whims and vagaries of the market and market returns and market earnings, especially based on how this permanent fund corporation board has been investing, then they're not going to have enough money to keep doing what they're doing. And they understand that the permanent fund itself, the dividend, is gone. I mean, this, again, I will be surprised it's an election year, so I guess I shouldn't say that. I guess I shouldn't say I would be surprised if we don't get it. We may get a permanent fund dividend this year, but by next year, it'll be a pittance. It'll be irrelevant. It'll be an afterthought if we get anything this next year. I think last year was probably the last big year of the permanent fund dividend with that $1,000 per person, when we should have gotten $3,400 per person. So already, again, it's about protecting the spend. Republicans don't want to talk about changing the oil tax code. They don't want to talk about, bringing that up because, they again, it's a protection of the oil industry. And I understand the oil industry is critical for the state of Alaska. Don't get me wrong. But even Brad, who is, again, it comes from an oil and gas background. That's his people. That's his tribe. Even he has said that there's $400 or $500 million still on the table that we could be getting out of this and should be for our finite non-renewable resource. Right? You can't ever go back and make up revenue from things that have already been taken out of the ground years ago. I mean, anybody that looks at this and realizes that we're not going to get paid for the first 7 years of PICA and that we're going to be pumping more oil than ever before, well, not than ever before, but more oil than in recent history, and yet we're going to receive less revenue, that ought to make you scratch your head. I mean, just put yourself in this position for a moment. Just put yourself in this position for a moment. You live in North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas. Pretend you live somewhere there, and you've got, 40 acres of land, and you've discovered oil on that land. And companies have come to you and said, we'd like to pump the oil out. We'd like to pump it out. We'd like to do it. And you create some kind of tax plan for them to take your oil. Would you be excited about them taking oil for 7 years out of your land and not even paying any taxes? Or producing, maybe you get a good amount of oil and a good amount of money out of the land for the first 5 years or 10 years. And then they start, and then they're going to start pumping more and more oil and you're going to get less and less. Would you be satisfied with that as a resource owner? No? Well, then maybe you should address it. Maybe you should look at it. That's where we're at. I mean, essentially, these legislators are supposed to be the board of directors for our corporation, quote unquote, because the state of Alaska owns everything collectively, right? So we're all corporate shareholders in the state of Alaska. That's what the dividend is. It's a corporate dividend. And if If they're not looking out for you and looking out, trying to get, as the Constitution says, the maximum benefit to the people, the resources are to be developed to the maximum benefit of the people, then what are we doing? They're failing at their jobs. And don't even get me started on the mineral rights, okay, guys? I mean, I know that people have been talking about it all morning. They've been talking about mineral rights. I banged the drum on severance taxes for mineral rights in this state for years. Instead of having this net profit tax and everything else, we should have a completely different form of tax. But we can't even figure out what to do with oil, which is our biggest thing in the world. I mean, that's the biggest revenue generator, biggest resource we have. We can't even figure out how to do that right. And you expect that they're going to pull it together on the mining issue? I mean, come on. I mean, or a fish tax. Yes, Frank, or a fish tax. I mean, if we can't get the oil taxation right, how do you expect us to get the taxation right on anything else? And yet all the Republicans, well, we can't do that. They'll just take their ball and bat and leave. Really? They'll just take it and leave. I mean, it's not like the oil won't be in the ground there still for them. It's not like they'll take the oil with them if they leave. It's a paper tiger when they come to those arguments. Alaskans need to be getting the maximum that they can. Again, the first decade of ACEs, of SB 21 rather, was to make up for the fact that ACEs had screwed up the take. And this is the problem with Alaska. First we had the ELF, and then we had taxation, then we had the ELF, and then we had I guess ACEs came after ELF to make up for ELF, which was the economic limiting factor, and then we had the ACEs program, which again, the pendulum keeps swinging one way or the other. We're taking too few taxes. We're taking too much taxes. We're taking too few taxes. We're taking too much taxes. Then the first 10 years of SB 21, we got, approximately what the market should give us, which was about 6.75%. But in this second 10 years, we're going to get 2% on average over the next 10 years. I mean, we've got to take a look at this. But again, a lot of Republicans are not going to want to do that. Want to restructure and constitutionalize the PFD. Well, that went over like a lead balloon the last time that we brought that up in front of the legislature. They're not interested in it. Why? Because it takes away their easy pots of money. The easiest money to draw from right now is the permanent fund dividend. It's supposed to be a 50-50 split. What was it this last time? 87% to government and 13% to the people? It's too easy. Do you really think that there's going to be enough legislators who have an interest in constitutionalizing the PFD and putting handcuffs on themselves? Because that's essentially what they're doing. I mean, again, go back to number one. They want to combine the funds so they can protect the spend. Do you really think that they will handcuff themselves by putting a POMV 50-50 in place and constitutionalize it? I mean, that would be the right thing to do. But is there the political will to do that? And again, a spending cap, Brad talking about an overall broad-based tax of some kind. I would only get behind that if we could find some way to put a spending cap in place so that any new revenues that were drawn by a tax would then offset the permanent fund dividend tapping. But again, nobody wants to talk about a spending cap. Because again, it shackles them. It puts handcuffs on them. Oh, we couldn't spend what we wanted to spend. This, and again, it just going back to what Terry was saying, that she just sat through a roundtable last night with 6 candidates, all talking about the same message. And budget was not a big topic. Are you kidding me? Budget should be the number one topic for every gubernatorial candidate. Every gubernatorial candidate should be talking about budget as the number one issue and item out there. But no, apparently it's too scary. We shouldn't talk about that because you freak out the straight people and you won't garner votes because, nobody wants to hear the doom and gloom of what's coming. Well, somebody has to be the adult in the room and tell these people that if they don't get their poop in a group, the arithmetic will teach them. Math is hard, I know. But it's coming. $1.5 billion deficits. And again, not a lot of buckets of money to draw from. But it's very disappointing when you have a six candidate panel and nobody's talking about the budget as their number one. That should be the number one priority coming out of the gate. Getting Alaska's fiscal house in order. Do we want to talk about the gas line? Yes. Do we want to talk about more resource development? Yes. Do we want to talk about health and safety and education? Yes, those are all great issues. But the number one thing we need to do right now is get our fiscal house in order, because then everything else falls into place beyond that. But here we are. All right. We're going to go. We got more coming up. We got one more segment, and then we're going to be joined by Chris Story. And we'll continue with him here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
And I'm, and I'm curious. I mean, Willie asked the question. I don't know why it didn't show up in the group, in the broadcast chat there. He says, Terry, what was their main topic? If the budget wasn't number one, what was their main topic? And Rick says, did anyone ask what their number one concern was? And if so, what did they say? So I want to hear what Terry had to say about that. I saw the announcement for that forum in Wasilla. And I was hoping that somebody would videotape it and put it on the internet. I'd like to watch that later on. Anthony says, our state leaders have failed for years. All of them will, as long as they can, depend on people's PFD to bail them out. It's like people dependent on a welfare. Why work? He's not wrong. Again, that's why they're going back to, try and combine these funds. Again, it's not to protect the permanent fund, folks. If you understand how the permanent fund works, this is not an issue. If you understand the mechanisms that are in place, there is no danger of hurting the permanent fund itself. Although that's what they're telling you. Oh, well, we could overdraw it. We could, if we don't have enough, we could No, there is a bar from them tapping into the corpus of the fund, which again just continues to spit out money year after year. But we need to protect the fund. This is not about protecting the fund. It's about protecting the spend. The only way the permanent fund itself can lose money is if there's some kind of market hit. and it loses in its overall value. But the fund itself, the seed corn, just keeps growing. More money is deposited into it every year. And then the earnings are spit out into the earnings reserve account. If they have to combine the funds to protect it, it just shows you and guarantees you that they just can't control their own appetites. LD says, once oil hits a sub $48 mark, there will be no hiding from the truth. It's coming, and people burying their heads in the sand is all I see. Yeah. Terry said the things that she remembers from the 6-panel thing is that the number one issues they talked about was lower housing cost, full PFD, crime, and budget. First of all, like, can I just ask a question? Why is it government's responsibility to create or incentivize or to find lower housing costs? That should have nothing to do with government. That's a free market thing. And a full PFD, great. I'm all for a full PFD. How do you pay for it? How do you pay for it? Sadly, even here in this chat among mostly like-minded people, can't agree what the revenue solution should be, but don't want taxes. I agree that it's going to take more than one thing, tax cuts, but something has to be done. I mean, I don't want taxes, but if we can get taxes with a cap, with a spending limit, okay, that'll help spread the burden out. That'll put more skin in the game. Is it perfect? No, but what we've got right now is definitely not perfect. This whole thing is, where has the already stolen PFD gone? Well, a big chunk of it was spent, and the remainder of it still sits in the earnings reserve. I mean, I'm assuming. But yeah, I mean, anybody that says full PFD these days, I just look at him like, are you on crack? I mean, I want a full PFD. Don't get me wrong. But that is just red meat rhetoric for the base. That's all that is, unless you have a plan. And if your plan doesn't include cutting the size and scope of government and having a fiscal plan to be able to pay for that full PFD, then it's all BS. That's what's going on. Okay. Trying to remain calm here. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Tell me you don't understand how the permanent fund works without telling me you don't understand how the permanent fund works, Randy. You do not understand how that works. But, hey. So we're continuing on here. Sorry, I got a little ranty during the break here. And I'll try and bring you up to speed here on the radio so that you understand where we're going with this. The whole point of this is that the number one issue on everybody's lips should be the budget. Now, we asked Terry, who said earlier that she was at the roundtable last night for the governor's roundtable, and 6 candidates were there, and they were all basically spouting the same message, that she wasn't impressed and that the budget was not a big topic. So we asked her, well, what were the number one topics? What were the things that they wanted to talk about? Lower housing costs, a full PFD, crime, and then the budget. She goes, those are the ones I can remember. She said there was something else, but those are the ones with budget at the very end. And all I can think of is lower housing costs. How is that government's responsibility to lower the housing cost? You know what's increasing the housing cost? The size and scope of government. The fact that we've got so much going on in the public sector and we don't even give two craps about the private sector. That's a big part of the housing costs. And why is it government's responsibility to deal with how that's not government? The problem is government. Because housing costs are a function of the free market. And the more the government meddles in the free market, the more we have all these problems. So lower housing costs. That was the first thing. And then a full PFD. Look, if I have another candidate tell me how much they're in favor of a full PFD, but don't have a plan to pay for it, I'm just going to punch them in the throat. I mean, seriously, at this point, right? How do you make that happen? Now, the PFD is paid for. That's the worst part of this. And Rick makes the point. He says how to pay for the fee. He says how to pay for the PFD. Follow the law. The question should be how to pay for all the other items. And he's not wrong. See, the PFD is fully funded. The PFD is fully paid for. That's the money that comes out of the earnings reserve. But what's happened is instead of paying the fully funded PFD following the law, they've taken that money and they've spent it on everything else. It is like deferred maintenance writ large, people. It really is. I mean, now you really want to get me upset. I mean, that's what it is. It was money that was supposed to go to the people, and instead they've decided that they know better than you and they're going to spend it on other things. But if I have another politician tell me, well, I'm in favor of a full PFD, what does that mean? What is that other than red meat being thrown at the base? I'm in favor of a full PFD. How do you get there? Well, first things first, you pay the full PFD, and then you worry about all the other stuff and figure out, and then you fight out over the rest of the budget. That's how I would do it if I was in charge. If I was king for a day, I would follow the law, pay the full PFD, and then say, oh, look, we've still got all these other bills. Maybe we should, figure out how to pay for all this. But, I mean, that's what they're talking about. Lower housing costs, full PFD, crime, and then they get down to the budget. The budget is the cornerstone of all these other issues. I mean, you want more money for education? Well, you better get the budget in line before you do anything because there's no other money. I mean, unless, of course, you're Anchorage. I don't know if you saw this. Anchorage, they pulled the plug on that 3% sales tax that was being proposed by the Mayor Suzanne LaFrance. And instead, they placed a one-time $12 million levy on property taxpayers. And the only reason they can do that is because since there was that increase in the BSA, then the increase to the funding formula, because they had already been funding the schools with local tax dollars to the maximum amount allowed by law. But because the BSA went up, they can do a $12 million increase. And so they're just going to do a $12 million tax levy. $12 million. So all you guys who are living in the Anchorage area, good luck. I mean, this is the answer to government. They don't want the spending to stop. Come on. They're going to combine the funds to protect the funds. That was like Bill Walker saying he was taking the dividend to protect the dividend. That's what he said. Do you remember the presentations where he got up with the whiteboards and he said, oh, here's how much was in the fund and here's how much we were going to take out to pay the dividend and look at what it was going to do. It was going to deplete the fund. And of course, he had all the withdrawals from the fund, but he didn't have any of the future deposits baked into that chart. And so it was all misleading and it was all lies. But remember, that was his answer. We've got to save the fund. We've got to take the fund to save the fund. We got to take the dividend to save the dividend. And this is exactly the same thing. We've got to combine the funds to protect the funds. We've got to knock down the wall that protects the corpus so that we can, protect the corpus. This is where we're at. I got to be honest. If there are politicians out there and candidates that are running for any level of office right now, gubernatorial, House, Senate, whatever, and they are not talking about the budget as the number one item, that they don't deserve your vote. They don't deserve your vote. And these people, they don't have any interest in living within their means. I mean, we had some simple things that could have happened last year, that even those simple things, I mean, I keep going back to that one program that Will Stapp found. That was a program that had been running for, I think it had been running for 3 or 4 years, and it served 0 Alaskans. Nobody was on the program, and yet the program was costing, I think it was $50,000 a year to administrate, even though the program was not being, and he couldn't get that. He couldn't get that program eliminated. He couldn't get it rescinded. The people who we had all the empty positions, right? The PCNs, the empty positions, where we had people that they had empty positions in their departments that had been empty. One of the department, the position had been empty for almost 10 years. And yet it was funded, but not filled. And so they said, well, let's just unfund, this X portion of, and I think it was anything over 2 years they unfunded. Oh, we couldn't possibly do that. We couldn't possibly do that. Why? Well, because those departments need that money. There are no people. What? You can't even do that? If any candidate is not talking about the budget as the number one issue, because all roads lead to Rome, right? Everything trickles out from the budget. Every other issue we're talking about today, defined benefits, BSA increases, more infrastructure, reform to the prison system, crime, everything goes back to the budget. If a candidate is not talking about the budget as the number one issue, they don't deserve your vote. And I know, like Brad was saying, there's a lot of politics that are going around a lot of this stuff. Maybe Shelley Hughes is not talking about even though she was the one that was involved with the fiscal policy working group and could talk about all 5 of the points that Brad was just talking about. Maybe she's not focusing in on them because she's trying to get past the primary to then change her to, I don't know. I don't know. I know how I would run a campaign. This is why I am not in office, but I would just basically tell people the truth. We're in trouble. And if we don't grab the bull by the horns and get a handle on this and wrangle this thing down, we're not going to make it, folks. We're coming to a fiscal crisis, a cliff. We know it's coming. Stop feeding me. Stop. Oh, I'm sorry. Not trying to have an FCC violation here. Just stop lying to me. That's essentially what's going on. Stop telling me that you're going to give me a full PFD. Stop telling me that this resource development will fix the problem. Because resource development is great, but it's not going to fix the problem. They'll just spend all that more because you haven't fixed any of the underlying, because there's no long-term fiscal plan, because there's no spending limit, because there's none of these things. You've got to get all that stuff in order before you start bringing all this other stuff online. All right, I'm done. I can't do it. We got to. We're going to be back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio will return in just a moment with Chris Story. He's going to try and calm me down. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. Right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
I almost said, don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining. That's what these guys are doing. That's what they're doing. Oh, don't worry. I'm just writing my name in the snow. Oh, hey, it's just rain. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. It's insanity. It's nuttier than squirrel poo. All right. Let's shall we bring on Mr. Story? God, why does he do this to himself? Why does he come on knowing that I'm going to be all wound up about something? And just, I mean, I don't know. He's a better man than I am. Let's put it that way. At least that's what his mom says. All right, let's go over here. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I keep coming back because one of these days I'm going to tune in here and you'll be self-immolating. It's like watching a slow-moving train wreck. We all know that it's coming. There's just going to be something's going to happen at some point. We know it.
You just can't get, you just like grabbing the bucket of popcorn and you're like, I can't look away. I can't look away. It's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like a giant commercial for, I don't know, some stress reliever or something. It's just, we get to live vicariously through your madness, your insanity, your outrage.
I try not to get too because I've never been a fan of ranty radio, and things like. But sometimes you just got to get a little passionate about it and sometimes you just got to call BS on the BS, right? I mean, if all the politicians are like pod people and they're all basically, saying the same things and nobody's focusing on what's important and what's going to actually get us through some of these things, then it's all just charades, right? It's all just political theater.
It's interesting, Ben Carpenter, he's not in office anymore, is he?
No.
Always seemed to speak his mind and speak the truth. Sarah Vance does currently still, and I don't know, there are politicians, Mike Shower. Seems like there's quite a few people. I'm not sure how we end up in this quagmire. It must be the Anchorage representatives or people from the greater metroplex of wherever. I mean, how does it get so lost in translation? Do you think it's because Juneau's so far away from the actual people?
I think that's part of it. I think the isolation of Juneau helps in that feeling of moral superiority and we know better than you. I think that's just the attitude of some of these legislators. I mean, Gary Stevens, been in there for 25 years, and Louise Stutz and like you said, many of the Anchorage legislators and Bert Stedman from Sitka. The problem is that we're not, for some of these people who supposedly hold Republican ideals, but none of them want to address any of these issues surrounding the budget. They don't want to control themselves. They don't, you've had people say, we just can't cut the budget anymore. Well, that's not true. You just can't cut the budget without some pain, and you're not willing to do that. But adults know that sometimes you got to scrub that wound out. You got to debride it. You got to get the gravel and dirt and old dead scabby skin out of there for it to regrow back better. Sometimes it's going to hurt a little bit. But none of these people want to make the adult decision.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the local statewide conversation we're going to be having this year on the Fair Tax Act. In other words, can local communities fund their budget, our budgets? Can we do what we do without fleecing the property owners and disrespecting our seniors and an ever escalating appreciation of property values to meet the budgetary needs? These kinds of things. It really does come down to, can we do more with less? Can we do less with less? Maybe we don't need to do more. Maybe we don't need to do as much as we're doing.
I tell you, brother, you're going to have a heavy lift on this fair. I am 100% behind you on the Fair Tax Act, but it is going to be a heavy lift because every no-neck nerd who works for government at one level or another is going to be in a full-on panic when they realize that you're trying to take away their gravy train. Their standard, they know. I mean, that's how they make money, right? That's where all their funding comes from. And you're talking about cutting away a big chunk of their funding with this fair tax. I mean, it's going to be a heavy lift. I'm 100% behind you, and I'll do anything I can to help push it forward. But just get ready for a fight, my friend. Get ready for a fight. It's not going to be pretty.
One of the arrows in the quiver is just to point to, you can't, like, say, for example, just the municipality of Homer, the city of Homer, we can't do more with less. Well, we've spent almost $1 million in the last 18 months on a comprehensive plan review and update, and we have more PhDs in this community per capita than any other community in Alaska. And you're telling me we had to bring in an Anchorage firm for $1 million and appropriate, like, it's outrageous. And we've got plenty. We've got too many people in the planning department. We could cut. I mean, there's places we could start cutting in all aspects of government. But the challenge is once you start goring somebody else's
What's
off.
Today's topic?
You've got me distracted.
All right.
See? Dramatic pyramid.
Hold on.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, we're continuing now. Chris Story is our guest, and we got chatting during the break there, and we ran out of time, so I don't even know what his topic is going to be today because I distracted him, which I'm good at. But he's not agitated like I am. He's always cool and calm and collected. He is he's just a positive guy. Positively detest him. I mean, he's just an amazing person. Let's get to it. Chris Story, the man from Homer, our weekly PMA boost uplift. Chris, what are we talking about today?
A pyramid scheme.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite. If you like to buy some soap, I'm all about that. I can make it happen. What pyramid scheme are we talking about today, Chris?
So the best way I could hook you in was with something dramatic like that. But I want to talk about Dr. Stephen Karpman's drama triangle. In 1968, he developed this drama triangle to describe, I think, what has become even more pervasive in our modern culture, and that is the roles that we can play. And there's 3 of them in this triangle: victim, rescuer, and persecutor. And sometimes we're moving around that triangle. Victims needn't always be victims. Victims sometimes become persecutors in opposite roles. And so anyway, I just thought it was pretty fascinating. So I thought, well, let's just kind of go through and we can self-identify. This isn't me pointing fingers at anybody. Okay. We can all self-identify with some of these. Sometimes you're, like I said, you're one or all 3 of these in any given day. So starting with the victim.
I'm always the persecutor. That's my problem.
I don't know. Listen up. You might feel a little bit like a victim here when it comes to certain legislative actions. I'm powerless. This is happening to me. This is the victim mentality. This is when we accept that role of a victim, we feel we're oppressed, we're mistreated. We believe that we've got no control over something outside of ourselves, when maybe we really don't. But when we adopt that role, we start looking for somebody else to fix the problem because I can't do anything about it. I'm a victim. We take almost no responsibility. We focus on how unfair things are. This could be life. It could be circumstantial. It could be how you're treated by your spouse, your employer, your customer. We use phrases like, why does this always happen to me? It's not my fault. Nothing I can do about it. And essentially what Dr. Karpman is saying is that what we get out of this, why we go to this, is we get sympathy, attention, and we get this warm blanket of relief from having to is the victim role. And if you stay there, you get stuck in resentment.
You've just described politics to I mean, today's politics, right? I mean, we're all victims. We feel helpless because we can't, the government. But again, at the same time, we also shouldn't feel like we can't do something about it, right? That's the thing. Okay, so victims. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sidebar there, but victims is the first edge of the triangle. What's the next one?
No, I'm glad you brought it up because it's exactly right. We can identify.
Well, Chris's phone is cutting out.
I don't think any of us.
Your phone was
sorry
cutting
about
out.
that. Kind of bizarre. I think I've just fixed that. So my point is, any and all of us can become a victim in any given circumstance. If you see it through the lens of politics, you're going to identify with one or two or three of these. The next is rescuer. Somebody comes along and says, I'll save you. And we've all felt that. I've felt it. I'm guessing you have as well. Like, look, I can fix this. Let me give you my advice. Let me protect you. It makes me feel needed. It makes me feel important and sometimes morally superior. If you solve somebody else's problem, you get the benefit of that. And say things like, Cartman said that if you're a rescuer role today, you're going to say something like, let me handle that for you. Look, you shouldn't have to deal with this. And it's a little bit like, no, don't go to the gym. Let me go to the gym for you. I'll do the workout. You'll get the benefits. But we know that doesn't work that way. But yet you, as the rescuer, get to feel valuable and in control. But here's what it costs you. You begin to burn out and you begin to resent the person that you're victimizing.
The person that you're rescuing.
Yeah, victimizing. Yes.
That's what you said. Rescuing. No, I mean, I can see that. I mean, I feel that way sometimes when, we're doing the show or whatever. I feel like I'm trying to rescue people. I'm trying to rescue the system. I'm trying to do it, but it does get a little tiring. I mean, you've been doing all my workouts for me for the last 2 years and you look great. I wish I felt as great as you look, right? I mean, that's kind of the point. So you got to do things for yourself. You can't do everything for everybody.
And you know what? The victim or the person that you're rescuing gets complacent and they become dependent. And then that's where the resentment builds up. You're like, you know what? I shouldn't have to do this for you. Yeah, but you always have. So now you've enabled me to not do for myself. And again, you could look at this through the lens of government doing for you. Don't worry about it. You can't do this on your own. Let us create a program governmentally that will solve this for you. You shouldn't have to work on that. And then Dr. Carmen said that the victim then easily slips into the role of persecutor when they begin to move in a different direction. They start persecuting other people, blaming others, criticizing. They feel this righteous indignation, allowing them to focus on, hey, you're irresponsible. They take on the role of the warden versus the prisoner. And again, I'm telling you, I felt this, you've probably felt this, but it damages relationships. Even though it might feel powerful in a moment, when you become a persecutor and you blame other people, you lose. Nobody wins.
Well, yeah, and I could see that, and that's we've seen that in the past where that victimhood then becomes, kind of transference of persecution on other people because they blame. Well, it's not my fault. So, who's done this to me, right? Who's done this to me? Because it's not my fault and I can't control it. Oh, it must be this person, this X person over here. They're the one. So now that's where the persecution comes in on that, which of course turns the other people into victims, and then somebody else has to come in and rescue them. And then this sounds like a vicious cycle, man.
It is. It absolutely is. It's like going into the wash cycle and you don't know whether you're coming or going. I think the solution to it all is, outside of being just really frank with yourself, I think is to keep these three lenses in mind as you move through your day and as you deal with your family. And that's probably, I would guess, where 90% of us probably relate most to this is in dealing with family, but it might also really deal in or come up when we're dealing with others in a professional capacity, or how we relate to politicians. Dare I say, I will not be a victim to property tax and overtaxation. I will also not try to rescue you from it. But what I hope to do this year with the Fair Tax Act is just bring education, awareness, and change to a system. So if I look at it as a system failure versus an individual personal failure on your part or the assessor, I'm not going to attack the assessor. They're doing a job. I'm not a victim of the assessing department. I think that we collectively are misguided in how we're going about it. So I'm not going to be a victim. I'm also not going to persecute them, and I'm not going to rescue you. What I hope to do is have an effect and an impact on the system under which we all live. And there's how we can make a difference without getting emotionally involved or trapped in this triangle where it's just about the drama and the trauma, and that can be addictive. And now it doesn't feel good to be a victim of the jackbooted thugs at City Hall. No, not at all. I'm not a victim because they're my neighbors and we're all in this together.
Right. So learn from the triangle, the pyramid of drama, the pyramid of drama. Are you a victim? Are you a rescuer? Or are you a persecutor? So where's the perfect place to be, Chris? I mean, right in the middle? I mean, is it better to be...
You don't want to be any of those things. You want to be personally responsible. And that's the most difficult thing. To matriculate through maturity and to become an adult means you take personal responsibility. If you are broke, you accept how you got there, and you are responsible to get yourself out of it. If it's your health, your wealth, your prosperity, your relationships, your faith, whatever it is, once you admit, I am responsible for how I got here, even if you were victimized, even if you were short-sheeted, even if you were cut off in traffic, how did I get here? Accept responsibility and move forward. That's what adulting looks like. And it's so much easier to say here in a 15-minute radio segment than it is to do in real life. I recognize it. But if you can also recognize these three other roles on how to avoid those traps, you'll be better off, and so will society.
Yeah, I mean, personal responsibility is the answer to pretty much all of this at this point, for sure. And because, I mean, I quite honestly, I refuse to be a victim. I've always fought back, even though when I felt victimized by government, I've still fought back. I've still pushed back on that. Those are it's some powerful words from Chris Story. Chris, I got a minute. What are your what's your show going to be about today at 1:00?
Leadership. Basically, bottom line, 1 hour on leadership, how you individually can lead where you are with what you've got starting today. You don't need permission to be selected or elected.
See, it's like a Jordan Peterson seminar all in 1 hour on the radio for free. Chris Story, 1:00 this afternoon down here on the peninsula. And of course, you can listen to his podcast later on at ilovehomeralaska.com. Chris Story, thank you, my friend, for coming on board and being part of it today. You've soothed me down a little bit. You've calmed me down. I appreciate that. Thank you for showing up and being with us today. We appreciate it.
Happy New Year.
Okay, I say this is where you say something back to me, because I was feeling victimized by there for a minute there, persecuted and victimized all at the same time. All right, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, folks. We're out of time. Tomorrow's another day. We'll see you then. Be kind, love one another, live well. Okay, well, that's it for today. I'm a little calmer than I was. I get so agitated when we're just being fed a line. You know what I mean? That's what I feel like. We're just getting fed a line when we're not talking about things that are important, like the budget and everything else. And instead, we're talking about all this ancillary stuff. It just makes no sense to me. Go back and rewatch this. Look at what Brad was talking about. That's the stuff that we should be focusing on this next session. All right, my friends, we got to go. We will see you guys tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.